Hi guys, so, alright, I have a bit of explaining to do. In my last video, I showed you some footage of my last day on the road. I did not know that that was going to be my last day at the time, but so now that it's been like a month and a half since this all went down, I'm going to recount this story and this timeline in as concise of a way as possible, just so that you guys have an understanding of why I am not living on the road anymore. So back in April, I had my surgery on my nose where they took part of my rib to reconstruct my nose bridge in order for me to be able to breathe out of the right side of my nose again. And by the end of April, I was leaving California to continue on with my trip. I had healed up enough to leave. As I was leaving California, I started having a heart episode somewhere in Arizona, and I had to go to a hospital. Joey and I were on a drive to Williams, Arizona from Southern California. And right when we hit the Arizona border or so, I started having a heart episode in the car. It was like 9 p.m. or so, I think. It was getting dark, and it really freaked me out because we were far enough away from a hospital that time felt like it was moving really slowly. And so pulling the trailer, not even near our destination, I kind of started blacking out in the car in the passenger seat, and Joey decided to take me to a hospital. The next hospital was like about 25-30 minutes down the highway. So during that time, he was pulling the trailer and basically flooring it, trying to get me to a hospital. I went to the hospital, they checked me out. Several hours later, I think around 2 a.m., I got released and we slept in a Walmart parking lot. After that, I started developing a paranoia about my proximity to a hospital. As you guys know, I have struggled with panic disorder in the past, and kind of obsessive thinking. I wouldn't say like some of the thoughts are maybe irrational. I wouldn't say that they're completely irrational thoughts that I have. I would say that they are valid thoughts for a person with a heart condition to have, but I have a tendency to obsess over them so much so that it affects my daily life. So I started developing an obsession with my proximity to a hospital because having a heart episode is really scary for me, and blacking out is really scary. Losing consciousness is really scary. You feel really out of control of yourself, and it's just not a good feeling. So there's Banks. I couldn't break the thought of, what if I have a heart episode right now? Where's the nearest hospital? If I'm going on a drive, am I going to be driving through a desert, the middle of nowhere, for several hours where there's no hospitals around? I started checking, searching along the route on Google Maps and seeing how many hospitals were along the way, how far apart they were from each other. And it just started getting really exhausting. I started having more anxiety attacks, panic attacks because of the obsession, and I started getting kind of sad because I thought that I was like relapsing. I thought that I had done so much better with my panic disorder, and I'd been on the road for 3 years and in the middle of nowhere a million times, and all of a sudden I am having them again, and I'm obsessing about my proximity to things again and whatever. So maybe like a week or two after I left California and had to go to the hospital that night, I met up with my mom, who was going camping in southern Utah with a couple of old family friends. So I met up with them there and started traveling with my mom and her husband, and then my two family friends for about 2 weeks. We had a really good time, and then after the family friends left, I went to Moab with my mom and her husband, who were still camping out of an RV. Some stuff happened there that was a little stressful on me. It involved my mom's life, and I guess I started taking on, I felt like I was responsible for helping her because she had decided to travel out of an RV as well. And since she was new on the road, I felt like I had to, kind of show her the ropes and stay with her for a little while, which I did. During that time, she was going through some personal stuff that ended up with her in a situation where she would be traveling alone if her and I were to part ways. And so I felt really bad about that. So we decided to travel together for a little while, and she ended up getting a job. That was going to cause her to stop traveling for a little while. So her and I had made plans to part ways. We went up to Salt Lake City together, where Joey went back to South Carolina to visit his friends and family. And then when he flew back, we went up to Lava Hot Springs in Idaho, which was my favorite town. And then we went to Jackson, Wyoming, right outside of Yellowstone. During this time, I still had my anxiety. I was still obsessing over my proximity to hospitals, and I was also thinking about my mom and what her life was going to be. And I started thinking about my future and whether or not I was still happy on the road because of the panic attacks I was having. I also kind of wanted to try to secure a future for myself that was going to be stable. You guys know that I had been kind of taking online classes since February, and it was kind of like a prep school for a master's degree program that I wanted to do. So I was kind of thinking about my future and when the time would be right to maybe not travel anymore, what my mom was going to do, having to deal with panic attacks, having to deal with Joey missing his friends and family, and just a couple other things, So Joey and I decided one day to go to Yellowstone. He had never seen Yellowstone. We were already in Jackson, so it was just a 2-hour drive to Yellowstone. Along the way, I started having another heart episode, which led me to start having a really big panic attack, which always escalates my heart episodes. Because we were driving through a national park, a really big one in Wyoming, there was no cell phone reception and no hospitals around for a long time. We were already about an hour and a half into the drive when the heart episode started happening, meaning we were an hour and a half from the nearest hospital, and it started getting really bad. So we pulled over. I tried to walk around a little bit to ease my anxiety. It wasn't working. It was getting worse. So we drove to the nearest visitor center. They did not have any medics at the visitor center or anything, but they did have a landline. So I called my mom and I told her what was happening. She was also in Jackson, but she was staying back at the camp. She ended up having to come and get me because I was frozen with fear. I literally could not leave the spot that I was in. I couldn't force myself to leave the spot I was in because that was the only place that I had access to a phone. There was still no cell phone service, but they did have a landline at the little convenience store. So I was too scared to leave. So my mom had to drive up and come and get me. And we spent the rest of the day exploring Yellowstone because we were already there. And my anxiety kind of went away a little bit once my mom got there. And yes, I know that makes me sound like a child. Yes, I know it is embarrassing, but yeah, I felt a little more comfort when my mom was there. Just because she knows about my heart condition, she knows about the episodes that I have, and she knows what steps to take when I start having those. So after we got home from that day, I was talking to my mom in her camper, and we were discussing the next week. The next week, she was supposed to drive to California and start her job, and Joey and I were going to part ways and start heading back east because I had kind of already decided that I needed a break from road life. I wanted to get my master's degree and stay put for a little while I was in school. The master's degree program was 18 months long, and I just thought that it was time for me to do that. All the while in my head, things were getting worse. I started getting really sad over the fact that my panic attacks were coming back, and I felt like I was reverting back to a mindset that I was in before I left to live on the road, which I was really miserable in, which is one of the reasons I went to live on the road, was because I didn't want to continue living if I had to live with the mental health that I was experiencing at the time. And I felt like I was going back to that headspace, so I started getting really sad. I told my mom that I didn't think I was going to make it once we parted ways, because I didn't think I was going to be able to drive back across the country, because I knew that it was going to be hours and hours and hours and days and days and days of me being paranoid that I was in between towns with hospitals, several hours in between each one, or whatever. In the middle of nowhere, I pictured going through Texas, New Mexico, and being in the desert and just being really far away from civilization. And I told her that I didn't know if I could make it. So she decided that we were going to do was the next day we were going to head back to Salt Lake City, and she was going to fly me from Salt Lake City to Miami, because I had talked to Joey about where he might want to live. I didn't want to go back to my hometown because I was miserable there. He did want to go back to his hometown because he missed everyone there. I kind of wanted to live out west. He did not want to live out west, so we compromised on the southeast, and we were going to move to Miami and go to Florida. It had a really good vibe there. Joey liked it when we visited. I never saw myself living in Florida or Miami, but the more I thought about it, the more the idea kind of grew on me. I liked the housing, like the look of the housing and everything in South Beach with the Art Deco district. I liked that there was a beach, the weather was good, and it wasn't my hometown. So my mom decided that she was going to fly with me to Miami, and Joey didn't mind bringing the trailer back and meeting us in a few days. It was going to take him about 4 days to get across the country from Salt Lake City. So the next day we went to Salt Lake City, and my mom and I went... Sorry, I got a phone call. Anyway, so my mom and I went to the airport. The flight was canceled. We ended up getting put on an earlier flight, so we hadn't slept. Okay, so we drove down to Salt Lake City from Jackson, Wyoming. And then we were going to drive to the airport that day, stay in the airport hotel because our flight was at 6 a.m. the next morning. So we were gonna so we drove to the airport. It was a couple hour drive, and then we were in the hotel and we were going to sleep for the night, get some rest, get up early, and go. The flight in the morning got canceled, and so they put us on an earlier flight that night. So we ended up going to the airport at midnight to try to get on a 1 a.m. flight, which ended up also getting canceled. So we stayed at the airport. We were exhausted, and we got put on a 3 a.m. flight. At 4 a.m., we were boarding the plane, and we had sat down in our seats. We were having to take a connecting flight to Miami, and I got scared or overwhelmed or something, and I just couldn't do it. So I started having a panic attack, which was making my heart act really funny, and I mistook it for potentially having a heart episode. So they had to open the doors of the plane and let my mom and I off, and I just kind of broke at that point. Everyone had made so many accommodations for me to try to work around my panic disorder, and I started feeling like the biggest burden in the world, and I didn't want to continue living with this brain. My mom was at a loss as to how to get me back to the East Coast. Her new job was going to be based out of Miami, but she had training in California, so we were looking forward to moving to Miami because she was going to be able to move there as well. We weren't going to live together. We were just going to live in the same town. I was going to get my master's degree. She was going to work, and Joey was going to find a job there. And we all anticipated being really happy there. But I was having a hard time getting there. So after we got off the plane and went to the hotel, I guess fell asleep because I was so upset and overwhelmed, and I just went to sleep. My mom woke me up a little while later and said that the only solution that she could think of was to drive me herself to Miami and then fly out of Miami to make it on time for her training in California. Hated that. I didn't want anybody to have to do anything more for me to accommodate my panic attacks, my paranoia, my heart condition, my obsessive thinking, me, but they did. So my mom and Joey caravanned and drove me to Miami. We got there on a Thursday night. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we looked for houses to live in or apartments or whatever. And then on Monday, my mom had to leave to fly out to California for her job training. Joey and I had to also leave Miami because we were staying in my mom's hotel room with her, and when she left, we had nowhere in Miami to stay anymore. We couldn't afford a hotel on our own, so we left Miami. We did find a place that we wanted to rent, and we were really excited about it. Well, I was really excited about it. Joey was excited, but he was nervous. He had never lived away from his family before, or in a city, or whatever. So he was nervous about it, which kind of made me feel bad because I didn't want to like force him to like live a life that he didn't want, somewhere that he didn't want to be. So when him and I left Florida, the plan was to go back up to my hometown in South Carolina, which is also Joey's hometown, visit for 2 weeks, and then we were going to move down to that apartment. However, somebody else made an offer on the apartment, and they ended up getting it from under us, and so it was no longer available, and we no longer had a place to live in Florida. So we went up to South Carolina. The drive was not easy for me because, again, I was paranoid about everything. We got to my hometown. Joey had a house there that he used to live in. Like, I guess his parents have a house. His parents have like 2 houses on the same block. They're like small little houses. This area that we are from is very cheap, so it's not like crazy that they own 2 places, but they had their house and then Joey's house where Joey used to live before he traveled with me. So Joey was back at his house with his family and friends, and I was staying at my dad's house, which was like 15 minutes down the road from Joey's. I stayed there because Joey had a family dog there that did not get along with Banks, and so I couldn't stay there with Banks, so I was staying at my dad's house and splitting time between my dad's and Joey's house. As time went on, it became more and more clear that Joey did not want to leave our hometown, and so we approached the conversation of parting ways, which neither of us wanted to do. During this time, I had started going back to therapy to try to get a hold on everything, but it wasn't really working out, and I was still really sad, really anxious. I don't know, basically things were just getting worse and worse in my head. We talked about moving to Florida and how probably wasn't going to work because we had no way to go down there again and apartment hunt and do interviews and stuff without taking a couple trips from South Carolina to there. I just started getting really desperate for a place to live on my own. I didn't feel good splitting my time between so many different houses and not having a stable place to live where I had my things and my dog, and I just wanted to go to school and work on myself, and it was getting really difficult. So I told Joey, I said, okay, you're not ready to leave. I said, how about we wait until August 25th and then we'll reapproach the like moving conversation then. And in that time, I was just gonna go to therapy. When August 25th rolled around, well, it hadn't quite gotten to the 25th, but it was coming up, and I was getting pretty desperate to have my own place to live. I didn't feel good in my head. I was starting to not feel good physically because all the stress in my head having a physical effect on me, and I was pretty bad. So I talked to my mom on the phone, and I told her, we were discussing options for me about where to live, what to do, life plan, whatever. I talked to my dad a lot about it. I talked to Joey a lot about it. And we thought about the fact that if living in a city was on my bucket list in life. I wanted to live in a city for a year once in my life. They had brought up the point to me that If I were to move to a city, rent would be way more expensive. And because I would be in school full time and then working part time to try to afford my half of the rent, expensive rent, I might not be able to even enjoy the city that I was living in and enjoy my experience there because I would have no time to explore it. We came to a conclusion that maybe for the next little bit while I get my master's degree, we should just live in my hometown so that Joey can work and be around his friends and family and be happy, and we can live in a place with really affordable rent, and I can concentrate on school. I'm familiar with the area. I do have a couple of friends here, and my dad is still here. So there were gonna be like people around me that cared about me, so I wouldn't feel so isolated and bad all the time. So that was the final conclusion, was that we were gonna look for a place to live in my hometown. We started looking for places and nothing was showing up. My hometown is a college town, so all the little houses and apartments around here were already rented out by all the new students. I started looking for a place to live about a month after the semester started, so everyone was already in and occupying spaces. So I was having a really hard time finding a place to live, which was I started feeling really hopeless because I couldn't find anywhere to live. It was pretty bad. And then I found this place, which I will tell you about and show you. I've only been here for a week now. Well, today is Friday. Tomorrow is the date. I moved in on Saturday. Tomorrow is Saturday. So I've been here for 6 days now. I've been having a couple of problems here, and a pretty crazy thing happened here on my first 3 days living here, which I will tell you about in the next video. I am happy to have a place to live. I just need to focus on school and going to therapy and trying to straighten out my head. Thank you guys for sticking with me for the past 3 years that I've lived on the road. Really good experience for me. It was something that I needed at that time. And you guys have become my friends. A lot of you I've met in person at this point. And I just want to say thank you for watching and talking to me and being so nice. My goal is to get better and find things in the future and in the present moment to look forward to. I don't want to say that I gave up on van life or anything or living on the road. I don't feel like I did. I just feel like I got to a point where I needed to do something different for myself. And maybe one day I'll get back out there. But I'm gonna continue to make videos. I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you guys.